Imagine this. You're lying in bed at 3:17 a.m. staring into the dark. The world is still, but your mind is roaring. A silent scream echoes beneath your thoughts, not loud enough to wake the neighbors, but sharp enough to pierce your soul. You don't know what exactly is wrong. You only know it hurts. There's no wound, no blood, no visible enemy. Just a quiet, relentless pain pressing inward like gravity. Maybe it's grief or regret, or that bitter cocktail of loneliness, inadequacy, and confusion that brews slowly in the background of modern life. You feel like you're unraveling, not all at once, but thread by thread. And the worst part, you don't know if you should fix it or simply endure it. Now imagine someone walks into your room, not a therapist, not a friend, but something ancient, a philosopher, or perhaps a shadow of your own soul. They sit at the edge of your bed and say, "Don't run from this, lean into it. This pain is your power." You flinch. That can't be right. Pain is the enemy. Suffering is something to escape, to medicate, to fix. It's what society warns you about, what self-help promises to eliminate, what comfort culture teaches you to avoid at all costs. And yet, something in their eyes says they know a truth you've forgotten, something you were born knowing but learned to reject. So you ask them, why would anyone embrace suffering? And they answer with a question of their own. Why do you think you've been running from it your whole life? Suffering. The very word feels offensive, as if speaking it aloud might summon more of it. We learn to avoid it with the urgency of someone dodging bullets. We invent gods, pills, algorithms, and ideologies to protect us from its sting. And yet, it waits for us anyway. In heartbreaks, hospital rooms, empty bank accounts, aging skin, and dying parents. It arrives uninvited. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It doesn't care if you believe in it. It simply shows up, like a shadow you can't outrun. But what if suffering wasn't here to punish you? What if it was trying to wake you? What if the anguish you feel is not the mark of something broken in you, but the call to something deeper? Why do some people emerge from their darkest moments reborn, wiser, softer, unshakably grounded, while others collapse into bitterness or numbness? Why is it that some of the greatest works of art, philosophy, and human achievement are born from pain so deep it nearly destroyed the creator? Why did Nietzsche say, "To live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering"? Why did Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz, claim that the search for meaning is the primary force in human life? And why does a part of you, the quiet part beneath the noise, already know that suffering has shaped you more than comfort ever did? There's a lie we're told in the modern world, that happiness is the goal and suffering is the enemy. But what if that's a trap? What if our obsession with ease is precisely why we feel so lost? What if our culture's addiction to distraction, scrolling, snacking, soothing, has numbed us not only to pain, but to the very lessons hidden inside it? Every time you escaped a painful feeling with a shiny object or a soothing voice, what did you leave behind in the shadows? What unprocessed grief still lives in your nervous system? What rage were you never allowed to express? What despair did you bury beneath jokes and productivity? What dream died quietly because it hurt too much to chase it? We live in a time where suffering is seen as a glitch, but maybe it's the code. Maybe suffering is not the opposite of growth, but the very soil it requires. This is not a call to romanticize pain. This is a call to understand it, to stand at the edge of your own abyss and ask, what lives down there? Because buried inside every heartbreak is a mirror. Inside every loss is a question that could unmake you or awaken you. And at the heart of suffering is something few are willing to face, the truth that you are not who you think you are. You are not your job, your smile, your Instagram feed. You are something deeper, and suffering might be the only way to find it. So what happens if you stop running? What happens if you sit with the ache, the fear, the meaninglessness? What would it show you if you dared to listen? Because maybe, just maybe, suffering isn't here to destroy you, it's here to reveal you. But to understand how, we must go deeper, into the roots of the very problem no one dares name. We are raised in a world that sees suffering as an error. You're not supposed to feel anxious. You're not supposed to feel depressed. You're not supposed to feel broken or hollow or lost. If you do, it means something is wrong with you, something that needs to be treated, medicated, managed. But what if that's the first lie? What if the real illness is our response to suffering, not the suffering itself? Somewhere along the way, we replaced the wisdom of the soul with the logic of control. Instead of asking what suffering is trying to teach us, we ask how fast we can make it go away. And in doing so, we have severed ourselves from a truth that ancient thinkers never forgot, that suffering isn't a glitch in the system, it is the system. It is the furnace in which the psyche is formed, the storm through which the soul is carved. Carl Jung understood this intimately. He called it the shadow, the dark, repressed parts of ourselves that we spend our lives trying to avoid. The more we deny it, the more it controls us. But when we face it, when we allow the suffering to speak, it begins to transform. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is the hidden problem. We live in a culture of light that fears the dark, a culture of solutions that fears questions, a culture of comfort that fears the crucible of transformation. So we chase pleasure, we avoid pain, we sanitize our lives with routine and performance, hoping that if we look well enough, smile wide enough, and succeed loudly enough, we won't have to feel the slow ache gnawing from within. But it's always there, like a whisper, like a shadow. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this delusion clearly. He didn't ask how to avoid suffering, he asked how to transcend through it. In his view, life was not meant to be easy. It was meant to be overcome. That's why he said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." He wasn't offering comfort. He was offering a weapon, a way of turning pain into purpose. But instead of wielding suffering, we flee it. We see pain as proof that something's gone wrong instead of recognizing it as an invitation to evolve. At the root of this avoidance is fear, ancient and primal, the fear that if we let the pain in, it will swallow us whole. Jean-Paul Sartre called this condition bad faith, a kind of self-deception where we pretend to be something we are not to avoid confronting the terror of our own freedom. We deny the weight of our existence because to fully own it would mean admitting that much of what we do, our careers, our social lives, our distractions, is built on a refusal to feel, a refusal to face ourselves. Arthur Schopenhauer went even further. He believed that suffering wasn't just part of life, it was life. That to desire anything is to suffer, because the moment we want, we also fear not having. And yet, Schopenhauer didn't say this to depress us. He said it to free us. Because once we stop expecting life to be painless, we stop being shocked by pain and start being changed by it. But modern psychology took a different route. It began to pathologize pain, to diagnose despair, to label grief and numb it with chemicals. Of course, for many, this is necessary, even life-saving. But there's a danger when we treat every ache as a symptom, when we forget that much of our pain is not a malfunction, but a message. The question is, are we listening? Gabor Mate, one of the few modern voices willing to challenge the system from within, speaks to this directly. In his work with trauma and addiction, he noticed a pattern. People weren't addicted to substances. They were addicted to escape from suffering they didn't know how to hold. Childhood wounds, repressed memories, unmet needs. Mate writes, "The question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. Because pain is the origin. Pain is the story. And until we face that story, we will keep living inside it." This is the hidden problem of our time. We have built an entire society around pain avoidance. We overeat to numb. We overwork to distract. We overthink to delay. We overshare to be seen but not felt. We overachieve to avoid the feeling of worthlessness. But none of it works, because suffering doesn't vanish when ignored. It mutates. It becomes anxiety, depression, addiction, rage, a low-grade, unnameable dread that haunts our quiet moments. You know this dread. You felt it in the silence between texts, in the empty applause of meaningless achievements, in the guilt after pleasure, in the voice that whispers, "There has to be more than this." But here's the truth buried beneath the fear. Suffering is not here to punish you. It's here to reveal you. Pain is the psyche's way of saying, "Look here. This is where you're stuck. This is what you've denied. This is the wound that never healed. And if you can stop running long enough to feel it, if you can make room for the scream beneath you, your smile, you might begin to hear something sacred, not just sorrow, but meaning, not just fear, but transformation, because every shadow contains a shape, and every ache contains a seed. The ones who become themselves, truly, fully, are not the ones who avoided suffering. They are the ones who walked into it, weeping, shaking, burning, and came out the other side, not smaller, but more real. So now the question shifts. If pain is inevitable, if suffering is the soil of the soul, then what happens when you stop fighting it? What happens when you listen? What is your pain trying to show you? To see that, we need to look not just at the source of suffering, but at what happens when we refuse to face it. There is a strange kind of suffering that hides in silence. It doesn't scream, it doesn't bleed, it doesn't make headlines or demand urgent care. It moves quietly, like fog settling into your bones, into your daily choices, into the shape your life has taken when you weren't looking. This is the suffering of avoidance, the suffering of disconnection, not the storm, but the drought, not the breakdown, but the slow erosion of meaning. You don't cry in the shower, you just stop feeling anything at all. You don't collapse. You keep showing up, smiling, working, scrolling. You perform happiness, you mimic stability, and yet something vital is missing, something real, something raw, the part of you that aches to feel alive. This is what happens when we reject our suffering. We don't escape it, we become it. In our attempt to avoid pain, we give it power. In our refusal to feel, we let it take root in our subconscious, where it begins to rewrite the script of our lives. You don't trust others, but you don't know why. You keep sabotaging relationships, but it feels out of your control. You can't sit in silence because silence makes the ache louder. You feel alienated, unanchored, but you're functioning, you're successful, maybe even admired, and that makes it worse because the world keeps rewarding your mask. Beneath that surface lies an internal war, the wounded child trying to speak, the broken dream trying to mourn, the truth trying to emerge. But instead of listening, we override it all with busyness, brilliance, performance, until one day we wake up and realize we don't know who we are anymore. Psychology has a word for this: dissociation. It's what happens when the pain of presence is greater than the pain of absence. You learn to leave your body without leaving your house. You scroll, shop, talk, laugh, while some essential part of you watches from a distance, waiting for permission to return. Neurologically, the brain adapts, the amygdala heightens, the nervous system flinches at intimacy, the body forgets how to feel safe, even when nothing is objectively wrong. And so, the trauma remains, unprocessed, unspoken, unnamed. This is the cost of refusing to confront our inner wounds, not explosive breakdowns, but lives lived half asleep. But it goes deeper. This isn't just personal. It's cultural. A society that avoids suffering becomes sick with artificial joy. We manufacture pleasure on demand. Dopamine hits from screens, sugar, sex, likes, but it's never enough. The baseline shifts, tolerance builds, the hollowness deepens. Aldous Huxley warned us of this in Brave New World, a world where suffering was eliminated not by healing it, but by numbing it. He didn't imagine a world ruled by tyrants, but by comfort, by sedation, by the tyranny of pleasure without meaning. He asked, what happens when humanity becomes so medicated that it forgets how to feel? We're living that question now. We've engineered a world that shields us from discomfort, but in doing so, has made us fragile. We have lost our spiritual immune system. Think of it like this. Imagine a tree that never endures wind, never storms, never struggle. It grows fast, smooth, straight, but it is weak, shallow-rooted, hollow. Now imagine another tree, battered by storms, bent by winds, split and healed, struck and regrown. It is twisted, scarred, but it is deeply rooted. Its strength is invisible until the storm returns. Which tree are you? Which tree is our culture raising? There are consequences to a life built on pain avoidance. We become adults who fear silence, partners who can't hold each other's grief, parents who pass down shame because we never met our own, citizens who confuse comfort with freedom. We become people who settle, not because we don't want more, but because wanting hurts, because hope has teeth, because dreams require the courage to be disappointed. And so we trade wonder for routine, passion for safety, aliveness for predictability. This is the unseen consequence of unprocessed suffering. a slow death of the soul beneath the illusion of normalcy. But here's the twist. Suffering doesn't disappear. It leaks. It shows up in sarcasm, in cynicism, in that biting judgment you hurl at others because you can't bear to feel small. It shows up in ambition, not the noble kind, but the desperate, clawing need to prove you're worth something. It shows up in how you hurt the people closest to you, not because you're cruel, but because pain unspoken becomes pain inflicted. There is a term for this psychological transference, the repetition compulsion. You unconsciously recreate the original wound over and over, hoping for a different ending, but it never comes. Not until you become conscious of the pattern. Not until you walk back into the memory, not to relive it, but to reclaim it. This is the hidden architecture of so many of our choices, unseen wounds shaping visible lives. So here we are, a society sick with untreated pain, a generation fluent in memes but silent in grief, a world of hyperconnectivity and emotional isolation. And yet, be so. 'Neath all of this, something ancient remains, the soul's quiet cry for meaning. We don't just want comfort, we want to matter, we want to feel, we want to be real. But to do that, we must go through something few are willing to face. The fire, not around it, not above it, not in theory, through. Because only through the fire can the self be revealed. And so, we come to the crossroads, the place where numbness ends and transformation begins. But to choose that path means rebellion. Rebellion against the seduction of escape, against the false gospel of comfort, against the industrialization of your pain. It means stepping into the very thing you were taught to avoid and asking, what if this suffering is not a curse? What if it's a key? You were never meant to stay asleep. You were not born to chase pleasure, avoid pain, and die quietly in a box labeled well-adjusted. That is not a life. That is a script, written by fear, sold by society, and passed down like a family heirloom. But what if you could burn that script? What if the pain you've been running from your whole life is not a sign of failure, but the first spark of your awakening? This is the beginning of the rebellion, not against the world, but against everything false within you. It starts when you stop asking, how do I fix this pain? And start asking, what is this pain trying to show me? This shift changes everything, because now suffering is no longer an intruder, it's a teacher. You stop numbing, you start listening, you stop running, you turn around. And what you find is not a monster. What you find is yourself, the part you left behind, the part that broke, the part that needed you. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the integration of the conscious and unconscious self, not becoming perfect, but becoming whole. To do this, you must face the shadow, the repressed, hidden parts of you that were deemed unlovable, unsafe, unacceptable. The rage, the fear, the craving for power, the hunger to be seen. You don't conquer these things, you befriend them, because they are not your enemy, they are your exile, and healing begins the moment you bring them home. This is the rebellion, to choose wholeness over goodness, to choose truth over comfort, to choose real pain over false peace. But it's not just an internal shift, it's a new way of being in the world. You begin to walk differently. You no longer flinch at grief, you sit with it. You no longer apologize for your wounds, you honor them. You no longer chase validation, you become your own witness. The rebellion is quiet, but it is radical. Because in a world that profits from your disconnection, the most dangerous thing you can do is feel fully. History is full of those who walked through their fire and came out changed. Viktor Frankl, in The Horror of Auschwitz, discovered a truth more powerful than despair, that meaning could survive even in hell, that suffering, when connected to purpose, becomes transcendent. He wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." He didn't escape suffering, he alchemized it. And this is your task now. Not to be free from pain, but to be free through it. So how do you begin? It doesn't start with a grand epiphany, it starts with a whisper, a pause, a moment of honesty. You feel the ache rise in your chest, and this time, you don't reach for your phone. You sit, you breathe, you feel, you ask, what is this pain trying to say? And you wait. Not for answers, but for presence. Because presence is the solvent of suffering. It is the thing the shadow fears most, your undivided attention. This work is not easy. It requires death, death of your personas, death of your illusions, death of the belief that healing means feeling good. Sometimes healing means feeling everything you avoided for years, the grief you buried, the anger you swallowed, the love you never gave, but the truth you silenced. But in this death, something else is born, a self that is not built on approval but on truth, a power that doesn't dominate but integrates, a clarity that doesn't scream but radiates. You stop asking others to carry your pain. You stop blaming the world for your emptiness. You stop trying to win the game of control. Instead, you surrender. Not in weakness, in alignment. You begin to trust that pain is not a pit, but a portal. That the fire you feared would destroy you is the same fire that frees you. And in this new space, you discover a different kind of strength, one that doesn't need to be loud. You carry yourself differently, not because you've healed everything, but because you've stopped pretending you need to. This rebellion spreads. You begin to recognize others who have suffered deeply and survived. Not just survived, but awakened. You see it in their eyes, that quiet gravity, that soft fierceness. You speak a language without words. You no longer bond over superficial things. You bond over realness. Not, I'm fine, but I've been through the fire too. And suddenly, suffering is no longer isolating. It becomes sacred. A shared initiation into what it means to be fully human. Here's the secret. No one escapes the fire. Some just spend their lives running from it. Others walk straight in and emerge forged. This is not about perfection. It's about integration. It's about becoming real. The rebellion is not loud. It happens in your choices. To feel, to speak, to rest, to grieve, to be. You reclaim your life not by avoiding the dark, but by learning to see in it. And that is how you break free. You are not your suffering, but your suffering may be the bridge to who you really are. And now, if you've walked this far, you are ready for the truth at the center of the fire. Not just how to end the suffering, but what it was always trying to reveal. There's a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when the pain no longer frightens you. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't apologize, but it changes form. What once felt like a curse now feels like a compass. What once shattered you now begins to shape you. The fire you feared wasn't trying to destroy you. It was trying to burn away everything you are not. This is the final truth. Suffering is not the enemy of life. It is the doorway into it. Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of yourself. Everything familiar has fallen away. The masks, the performances, the stories you used to tell about who you are and why you matter. You've lost something, maybe everything. And yet, beneath the grief, beneath the ruins, there's a stillness, a silence, and in that silence, something rises. Not an answer, not a solution, but a presence. You, the real you, the one who existed before you were taught to hide, the one forged in the very suffering you tried to outrun. This is the sacred paradox. Suffering, when faced, does not make you less. It reveals what is indestructible in you. Not your image, not your identity, your essence, your capacity to feel deeply, to break and keep loving, to fall and still rise, to be utterly undone and somehow still whole. Nietzsche called this the yes-sayer, the one who, instead of cursing life for its pain, learns to affirm it all. He wrote, Amor fati, love your fate, not tolerate it, love it, even the dark, especially the dark, because it is the dark that carved you, and suddenly everything changes. You stop asking, why me, and start asking, what now? You stop trying to return to who you were, because you see clearly now, that person was never whole. The breaking wasn't the end, it was the birth. There is no going back after this. You no longer measure life by comfort, but by depth. You seek not the absence of pain, but the presence of truth. You stop needing ever thing to make sense, because you've touched something deeper than meaning. You've touched being, the simple, unspeakable fact that you are here, alive, aware, awake, and that is enough. But let's not romanticize this final stage. To awaken through suffering does not mean you will never hurt again. It means that when the hurt returns, and it will, you no longer fear it. You bow to it. You meet it like an old friend. Because now you know, each ache has a voice, each fear has a root, each sorrow has a shape. You become fluent in the language of the soul, and what once felt like chaos now begins to feel like guidance. You start to see it everywhere. In the man grieving at the cemetery alone, in the woman smiling through tears at a concert that reminds her of someone she lost, in the child staring silently out the window, already tasting the pain of growing up. You see it in art, in poetry, in the stories we tell and the silence between them. This hidden river of sorrow that runs through all of us. This shared ache we carry beneath our jokes, our masks, our small talk. And you realize, we are not separate because we suffer. We are united by it. Suffering is the thread that binds the human story together. It is the place where compassion is born, where pride dissolves, where empathy becomes real. Because once you've felt your own darkness, you can no longer deny someone else's. This is the ultimate gift of suffering. It humanizes you. It strips away your armor. It humbles your certainty. It opens your heart in the places it was once closed, not because it made you soft, but because it made you real. And when you become real, you stop pretending, you start living. So where do you go from here? Not up, not forward, not out. You go in, deeper, further, truer. You carry your pain, not as a burden, but as a guide. You create from it. You connect through it. You walk with it, not in shame, but in reverence. You let it whisper truths no joy could ever teach, and you become someone different, not someone healed, someone healing, in motion, in process, in truth. Because wholeness was never about being untouched by pain, it was about being transformed by it. So if you're hurting, still hurting, if you're carrying something that feels unbearable, if you're lost, shattered, raw, let this truth settle deep into your bones. You are not broken, you are becoming, and the suffering you fear may be the very thing that makes you whole.